Hello everyone. I'm Ahmed Abdelsabour. I am a research assistant at PenTag, one of the evidence assessment group for NICE. And this would be our project on an R-Shiny app to visualize indirect treatment comparison. It is my first Shiny app, so probably it would be underwhelming after the previous sessions. So for background, Um, NICE is turning to cost comparison to, to cope with the growing demand for HTA. And essentially, um, for cost comparison, it is the same as cost minimization in that the new intervention has to demonstrate similar or improved efficacy to one of the options available, widely available within the NHS for the same indication and have similar or less cost. So this is clear when there's head-to-head trials, but not when there's indirect treatment comparison involved in the process. So a recent paper we were working on uh, aimed to explore this and to provide guidance in the methods used. So the paper aimed to explore 4 questions. The first is how to determine that two treatments have similar benefits when there is no head-to-head evidence available. What are the available methods to determine that a new treatment is not inferior to a comparator, and a systematic review of all the previous EAG decisions and NICE decision and EAG reports on cost comparison to explore what factors facilitated or acted as barrier in the decision. Finally, how this information and likelihood of similarity was presented for decision maker. And um, you can see that the first 2 questions are for the statistical method. The third is a systematic review, and the fourth is we aim to see how similarity was visualized within papers and within previous EAG reports. So the findings that there is no guidance on how to visualize those results to allow the EAG or the committee to provide recommendation on the suitability of the new intervention for this approach. And one of the recommendations from the paper was to visualize the results of non-inferiority indirect treatment comparison should focus on central intervention to use first plot to show the identity line, essentially the line where there is no difference in effect, equivalence margins informed by the literature, and to show confidence interval for each comparison, and to allow for the plot to have other considerations from the committee. For example, the maturity of data, the number of trials, the number of patients, the grade of evidence. So initially, we aim to develop an R function to show an example how to apply our recommendation, since R is the gold standard for visualization in the field. And after having the R function and having some extra time waiting for opinions from stakeholders, we decided to add a user interface using R-Shiny to allow for a wider audience, clinicians, non-coders. So here's how the app addressed each of the recommendation. So to anchor everything around one reference treatment, the Shiny app allows for 2 modes of data entry, either manual or uploading data, and it is anchored around either the intervention or a reference treatment that all the interventions are being compared to. The first plot is generated using ggplot, It conveys the strengths of evidence and maturity. So it maps four variables: data maturity, number of trials, number of patients, grade rating, into two aesthetics: color gradient and thickness. Finally, we hope by incorporating the recommendations and any feedback from the session here um, to provide this template for graphical representation of non-inferiority. So this is an example of the output of the app, and for a live demo. So first, the name of the outcome and the measure and the units, all of those are used to generate the title of the plot and the caption within the plot. So for example, if we go for with the measure being blood pressure and the unit being millimeter mercury, and the user could choose two forms of inputs, either manual or data, loading their data. What is the definition? Is it confidence interval or credible interval? And the value of the credible interval or the confidence interval. Then have choosing the direction of the comparison. So is it the intervention versus comparators, or is it multiple comparators versus reference treatment? And as the user adds more comparators, the lower list should be dynamic and adds another card for each comparison. Then data, if there is a direct link, the level of maturity, data maturity, the number of trials informing this link, the number of patients in those trials. Then the summary statistics for each comparison. For example, here. And the number of equivalence margins. So currently the app allows for 4 equivalence margins. And we could apply exponential transformation for example, statistics like hazard ratio. So the value, for example, it could be P, let's say that the source is clinical expert. In the visualization setup, the user could choose how to define color. So for example, maturity of data, and how to define thickness, for example, maturity, number of trials, number of patients, grade rating, and then generate the plot. And having the inputs initially by the user to be in the caption and to download this block. Could also have another mode of inputs, for example, to upload a file. And this will change the inputs to this screen. Which then shows the first 6 rows of the table and calculates a point estimate and lower and upper limits based on what the user selected in the first setup page. Of course, the name of the comparison should match what was uploaded in the file. Okay. So for limitation, Scarcely does not use direct statistical inference, so it relies on the user to either manually put the summary statistics for each comparison, or, for example, the file at which they already calculated this and have um, accounted for variance and so on. So that was my experience as a first-time Shine user. And the resources I used to make this app. So firstly, free online resources, the visualization chapter from the data science, R for data science book. Mastering R Shiny book also is available free. And the Shiny gallery, which have lots of features. And it shows what you could do using R Shiny, of course, and the codes to do it. There are also low-cost courses, Data Camp, the Shiny track, community help, so there's Stack Overflow. So there's this joke that whatever problem you are facing, there are 2 people on Reddit in 2009 who already discussed it. So it's similar to this, like whatever issue would have, there are people who already discussed it in Stack Overflow most of the time. Large language models, so help it with syntax error debugging, more efficient coding. So being first time to use Shiny, there was lots of inefficient coding, and large language model are very good at detecting this and providing suggestions. But also there is a limitation that sometimes they could suggest functions that don't exist, or they could overcomplicate the code to the point that you feel like your code is a black box. You don't know how it works. And that's an issue since you then can't debug it if anything goes wrong. There's also guidance for mentors. So there's sometimes very specific questions where you have within the project. So having a senior who is more experienced with R and familiar with the project is the best way to get a specific answer sometimes. And feedback from colleagues within the project on the user interface. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. Very nice tool to present there. There's a couple of questions in the chat from Howard. It's often unclear what threshold to use for non-inferiority testing. Evidence and literature can have uncertain meaning, and the company EAG committees needs to consider multiple options with different conclusions. Can your tool illustrate a variety of thresholds?
Yes, so you could add whatever number of thresholds within the image, and the source of each threshold. For example, is it a paper on the minimal clinically important difference? Is it consultation? So yes, yeah.
That's nice. And is the tool public? It looks like it's public, but
So
is it for
currently
anyone
it
to use?
is, yes, yeah, but
Great.
not the code. So I'm still learning to use GitHub. So the code itself is not public, but the app itself is already on Shiny IO.
Great. Maybe we can catch a link in the chat at some point. And then another question from Jesus Rodriguez. What did you find most challenging as a first-time Shiny user?
I think um, the reactivity part. So it's very iterative in that you do something and you find that it's not working. Then why is it not working? And like having this uh, reactivity between the user interface and each inputs.
Okay. And any particular resources helpful for that kind of challenge? It's helpful you mentioned a few that you...
Yeah. So the book on R-Shiny. We also had some material from a previous training we did with a consultant on Shiny app, which helps a lot. So that training was my first time being exposed to R-Shiny. As I said, also large language models are very good at detecting any issue with your code, and any inefficient coding, it could suggest more efficient way to code this function, for example.
Nice.